Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Podcast Pasta. That's a podcast that's like pasta, not the podcast that's about pasta. As always, I'm your host, Mike, and today I am joined with Avelia. You are a voiceover artist and model known for some of your more erotic work, but you also post, some safer work stuff. You can find your work on YouTube as well as Twitter. Ava, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on the program. Now, Ava, I know I gave you a very brief introduction, but I guess if you kind of want to expand on that and I guess explain in your own words what you do and what motivates the work that you put out.
Yeah, so I create kind of, I guess it falls into the bracket of the ASMR roleplay kind of stuff, but just voiceover stuff in general. I make a bunch of videos on YouTube, and I make, I guess we'll use the word spicier stuff on Twitter and other platforms, but I guess we'll just focus on the YouTube stuff for now. I've always been into voice acting, and this really gives me the freedom to just be able to do that in my own way. There's no big projects that need like a director and a casting call. It's just kind of me, my microphone, and my software.
Now, I've had a few voice actors on the program before, and I guess a few creative talent in general on the program before, and usually people come from all different kinds of backgrounds. Some people pursue this as just a hobby for themselves, and that's how they got started with it. Others, studied whether it's acting or whatever, in college or in like a more professional setting before like kind of pursuing it on their own. So I guess for you, is voice acting something that you've studied like in school, or is it just something that you're doing purely as like a hobby outside of like a school setting?
It's mainly just a hobby. So I started doing voice acting back in high school. So I would have been like, oh goodness, like 16. And then when I went to college, because college is different here in the UK, I did acting for 2 years there. So I did do some acting and study it. But then after college, I haven't picked up acting in that like formal sense. So it's more of a hobby now. But I had a little bit of a background in it.
Well, I guess just to kind of expand on that, would it be something that you'd be curious to like, because I don't know necessarily like your age or anything, but would it be something that you'd be curious to like study in a collegiate setting or in like a more professional sense, or are you just fine treating it as like a hobby as you are now?
A bit of both, really. I know that sounds really vague, but I do really enjoy acting, and if I could do that in more of a like an educational setting, I feel that I'd really enjoy that. I do just love to learn things, and I'm also a big theatre kid, so just music and theatre is something that I've just enjoyed for a while. So yeah, I think studying that would be quite fun, but I'm also somebody that I'm a little bit bad with things like deadlines and and just things like group projects, and that kind of stuff stresses me out. So I feel like it's best if I just keep it to myself.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Now you were talking about how you always kind of had an interest in voice acting, and for some people they become interested in voice acting either because they have a fan, they like animation, and for a lot of them, especially like Japanese animation, the whole dubbing process of like translating you know original Japanese animated works into like English and stuff like that, and they get kind of invested in that whole process. So I guess I'm kind of curious, like more specifically for you, like what do you think kind of spurred this love for voice acting?
Good question. So round about before I started doing voice acting, so when I was about 15, me and my family, we just got a Netflix subscription, and I was really into like making the most of it and just watching as much stuff as I could on there. And that's where I discovered a lot of really like popular anime. I'd watched like a couple before, but it was more just like, this looks cute, we'll watch this. So I started watching things like Attack on Titan, Black Butler. I can't remember any of this right now. But just kind of like a lot of big names. And I was just really into the stuff that went into the voice acting behind that. I started joining like groups when Amino was still a thing. I joined groups on Amino and like Facebook groups to do with it. And there was a bunch of people that were talking about the voice actors and cool stuff that the voice actors have done. Like in Attack on Titan, one of the characters called John, his voice actor is Jonah Scott, who's like a very beloved voice actor. And he'd do a lot of really cool stuff. And I was just really inspired by that. And I was like, you know what? That sounds kind of cool. I'd like to do that. So I looked into kind of how to start doing that. How would one begin doing that? Because it's not something I'd really heard of. Whenever you think acting, you'd always think just like screen acting or TV. So when I started looking into voice acting, there was a video by CDog VA, and it was like how to start voice acting or a beginner's guide to voice acting, and it was just a really good guide of just how to get going. And yeah, from there it's just kind of been following those steps and learning tricks of the trade, I suppose.
Oh, that's interesting. So, well, I don't know, because in the past, admittedly, I've been kind of critical of, I mean, granted, I don't know if it's necessarily the same for like, you know, anime on like Netflix, but you know, like when you have Netflix original shows and they have to do, like English dubbing for them, and most of the time I just find it completely awful. It's mainly for like the live action shows. I don't know if you really engage with that often. I'm not really sure.
I understand what you mean. Yeah, for some of the live actions, the dubbing isn't the best.
yeah. But so I guess how would I go about this? So have to be careful my wording here. I guess for some of the spicier content that you do, because admittedly, you know, I imagine a lot of people when they first get into voice acting, they don't immediately think, "Oh, I'm going to be doing this type of work," right? Like, you know, you don't really. I guess, was there any kind of hesitation in you doing that type of like work for yourself, or were you like just immediately from the get go, like, "Yep, I'm down"?
Initially, I think there was a little bit of hesitation. It wasn't so much making the content, but it was like, once I start making this, I kind of have that carbon footprint. And there's nothing like, you know, what if I do this and then I want to go and get like a job or something, you know, I decide that content creation isn't what I want to do. I sort of have that lingering somewhere on the internet. So I really had to sit down and decide this is definitely something that I want to put out there.
Right, yeah, because I imagine it has to, like, you know, with like any part of acting, you have to be in kind of I guess a particular type of headspace to approach that type of work. You know, was there any kind of difficulty in you like first start, like did you at first like initially feel any kind of discomfort doing that type of work, or was it or yeah, did you initially feel any type of discomfort doing that type of work or no?
I mean, I've always been somebody that's kind of likes to go into things with just no shame and just, you know, full send things. So I guess for my part, there wasn't really much like shame or anything like that. But when I started to make that kind of content and it picked up like traction and people started to see it, the kind of responses I'd get were things that threw me off a little bit. I just didn't expect people to be so just like brutally honest. Some people are just very open about their opinions.
I mean, fair enough. I've been known to be very honest about mostly about my like hot takes regarding media. It's like a lot of what this channel is outside of interviews. But that's interesting. Are you ever kind of and because this can apply just broadly to anybody that like has this focus on like, I guess, with their art or, you know, with anything that they create, if they have like a focus on one specific like genre or one specific topic
Mhm.
that they feel they can be like locked into doing that for like essentially the rest of their work because it's like what they're known for. Is that
Mhm.
anything that you're kind of worried about, I guess, with like the spicier content that like, let's say if you want to pursue something else that it might not pull the same audience?
Um, yes, that's kind of a. I feel like when you create content, especially with like the voiceover stuff, when you step into NSFW and when you start to like gain an audience for that, it's very difficult to go back because then you're building an audience based off of that kind of content. Um, and I think it's not as bad, but kind of the vice versa. That if you start making just casual listeners, when you then go into the more like erotic side of things, it definitely puts a lot of people off. So it you can either make content for both of those groups, in which you're making like double the content almost, or you can focus on one but just have to neglect the other. So yeah, it's a bit difficult sometimes, especially when they're so usually people are quite separated in those groups.
And your approach has been to try and do like try and make content for both.
Yeah.
And you find so far that's been kind of panning out for you in terms of like building your audience. I mean, I would imagine because I would say that you do have a pretty sizable audience, at least from what I see on like Twitter.
Thank you. I'm going to be so real with you. That is just, I'm still getting used to that. With YouTube, it was a very like steady growth. Each time I'd post something, it was just learning the algorithm and learning about what worked, what didn't, and learning and growing from that. Whereas with Twitter, it was posting something and it just doing exceptionally well and just a bunch of new people coming in and me not knowing what to do with all those people. Uh, so yeah, it could be tough to create for both of those audiences because again, it's like doing twice the work. So you got to be careful not to get too burnt out. You got to make sure it's enjoyable for both of them. It's like it's almost kind of like living two lives. You've got to kind of attend to both of them and give them, equal treatment.
Right. Hashtag humble brag and everything. Oh, I'm such a huge creator on X and everything. It's I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Um, but yeah, not only have you built kind of this like following, but also I've noticed that you kind of, you've done quite a few, like, well, yeah, at least kind of quite a few like collab works outside of what you're doing here on
Hmm.
Podcast Pasta. Obviously, the highlight of your career, but no, I've noticed you worked with other voiceover artists.
Hmm.
That you've also occasionally streamed with them and stuff like that.
Hmm.
I guess how has that experience been for you? I guess how has it been for you to kind of meet up and like work with these other artists that are also in this field trying to make it for themselves essentially?
Yeah, it's been really fun. And when I first started, I didn't really have any connections in the field. Um, so I was very much on my own, and I was like, I don't really know anyone. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'll just kind of learn as I go. Um, but this year, I've been trying to reach out to more people and do more collaborations, and there's just so many lovely people, lovely creators in the community. Um, and collabing with them, it's so fun. I love doing it, and I love meeting new people and looking at how I can collaborate with them.
Mm. Well, here's hoping to more collabs in the future.
Of course.
Um, So I guess sometimes I've talked about this before on the program, but I sometimes use this as like, let's say for some of your fans listening to this, and they're kind of curious about like themselves getting into it because they're a fan of like, let's say your work, and they also want to get into
Mhm.
voice acting. Um, So let's say hypothetically you had a fan like sitting in front of you and they're asking you, "Oh, what would you recommend for first getting started into voice acting? What piece of advice would you tell them?"
Hmm. That, that is a good question. Hmm. A lot of times it's case by case, but if we're looking for general advice, I'd say think about what kind of niche you want to go into. Um, think about what specifically you want to do. I mean, do you want to be someone that's like a jack of all trades and kind of dips their toes into different genres and different types of content? Do you want to just focus on like doing voiceovers for animations? Do you want to just focus on doing stuff like on YouTube? Um, and try to like narrow down those pathways of what you want to do. What kind of vibe do you want to give off? Do you want to give, do you want to come across as someone who's quite lighthearted, quite funny? Do you want to be someone who's a bit more serious? Build this character for yourself and decide what do you want them to look like. And I think that's the first step is creating that identity for it. And I think that's the funnest part, in my opinion, is just getting to make this person, getting to make this person who you'll present yourself as.
Yeah, I find that especially like in the modern age with like social media and everything. I think I can't remember where I've talked about this before, but it's kind of like the idea of like growing you kind of have to like sell yourself more than anything else. I guess I was talking about this in relation to like artists because it's like one thing to like let's say create a beautiful picture or something, but like it kind of has to nowadays it has to kind of go beyond that, as you see that sometimes with people that post OC work and stuff like that. Like you have to build a narrative out for a character. There, God, if I had a better memory, there was this like post or something that was like you can't sell your character just in a void or something like that. I'm phrasing it poorly, but like it's such a good like kind of I mean, it was done as like kind of a joking thing, but it was kind of really poignant. The fact that like you have to kind of build a story or like build a character out of like yourself that you just can't sell like your work in isolation. And I think that applies, broadly across the across all creative fields. Um, and I even see it with your work too, because you kind of built like this kind of I wish I had a better term, like avatar for yourself. Like, yeah, I know you build like a VTuber model for it, and occasionally you do stream with it. But
Yeah.
well, I guess kind of diving into that, like, what was the inspiration for? I can't remember, and I'm not logged into Twitter on my computer, but you have like an avatar for yourself that you do stream with. So I guess talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So I feel like with content creation, at least if you want to, make it into like a career, or if you want to keep like an audience, a big part of that is giving yourself an identity that people can latch onto. Um, because eventually you want people to enjoy your content for you, not just specifically for what it is that's been created. Um, so, like sometimes you look at bigger creators and some people like just love them for any content they make rather than just one video that they've done. And that's the goal for a lot of content creators. So that's kind of where like building that identity comes from. And you've got to keep it consistent across like all platforms, which is why again having like an avatar or an OC is really poignant and good for that. Hence if I do streams, it's with like that character. If ever I get art, it's that character. If anytime I do anything that like isn't involving like isn't like a dub of like an animation or isn't like a comic of another character, it is just me if I can help it. It's like a brand almost.
Yeah, exactly. Like even I've had to kind of do it to some degree with like this show here, even though it's just mostly in audio format. Like when I built out into like video, I decided to kind of give myself a little personification that and part of that was also honestly to help me with video editing, because it tells me like visually like when I'm talking versus when my guest is talking. So that's a little fun thing for me. Um, but I have noticed that, like, you know, with your Twitter and everything, you do occasional like dubbing of you know, animations, and I
Mhm.
think for my I mean, just I guess kind of help me to understand this. Like, you accept commissions for these, but some of them I think you just kind of take it upon yourself, right? Like, you kind of do it like pro
Mhm.
bono, like a fan dub of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'll see like an animation that I think would be fun to do like a fan dub of. Sometimes they have voiceovers already, and I'm like, you know what, I want to throw my hat in the ring and see what I could do. And sometimes they don't have any voiceover, so it's like, oh, I think I could like add to this. And then I'll reach out to the creator and ask if it's okay for me to do that, and if they say it's okay, then yeah, I go forward with that. Um, Record my part, edit it all together, sure I credit the initial creator. And there you go.
So what? So I guess kind of going more into it. Like, what do you? What's your decision making deciding like, oh, I want to like fan dub this? Is it just like you like the animation, or
um, it's yeah, it's a mix of a couple of different things. So if I think the animation looks good, or if I think it looks like well made, or if there's like a good amount of effort gone into it, then I like people who are passionate about their work, and if I can see the effort that's gone into it, I'm enthusiastic. Um, Also, if it's an animation of a character that I like, or from a franchise that I like, or a character that I could think I can sound similar to, then I'll try and pick those.
so in doing because you do like, you know, impressions of certain characters,
Mm-hmm.
from like different franchise and stuff like that. I guess
Mm-hmm.
as when doing these impressions, what do you think is like your strong suit? Like, who do you think are like characters that you kind of gravitate towards in terms of like, oh, I could do a really good voice for them, or I could do a really good impression for them?
Ooh. In terms of like speaking, um, it's definitely characters that have like lower voices. Like if they talk too high pitched, or they're really like squeaky, then I'm not very good at doing those voices. So if a character has like a naturally lower voice, it's easier for me to do. Also, if they have an accent that's easy for me to replicate, so like a British accent or Australian accent, and those are kind of in a ballpark that's easy for me to work with. So those characters are also easier for me to do.
How good are you with American accents?
I can do an okay American accent, but it's not. I'm not the most confident in it.
Fair enough, fair enough. Well, yeah, because America, there's like a lot of different regions. Like,
Hmm.
you know, I'm kind of curious. What do you think my accent is from? I always kind of get like a gauge from this because some people like know where I'm from. So I guess as somebody that does accent work, where do you think I'm from?
Um, See, I'm really bad with like anything geography, so I could say a place and it just doesn't make sense. Um, I'm gonna say Michigan.
Oh no, no, not even
Okay.
close. No, it's fair. It's fair. I think I have like I forgot what they call in like linguistics, like the general like American accent. You know,
Hmm.
it's not indicative of where I'm actually am, but
Hmm.
like it's obviously I don't have a pronounced like accent like a New Yorker. Hey, taxi. I shouldn't be
Yeah, or
doing that. That feels
like a Texan
offensive. It's
accent.
probably not, um, but so I guess you know, this isn't really like obviously none of this is sponsored, but I always like talking about this with, I guess, especially guests that work with like their voice or doing like audio recordings, because you know it's also kind of the same realm that I am with this podcast. I guess what's your equipment? Because right now I'm using the very humble, Shure basic podcast mic. You know, like the I think it was like $200 or something when I bought it. You know,
Jealous. I love show mics.
I mean, they get the job done. You know, I've heard better. I think I messed up buying mine because it has like a dual input thing that, in retrospect,
Mm,
I don't think I really needed. But you know, it was like the beginning podcast mic, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So I guess
Um,
I'm curious, like, what's your setup?
so I'm using the Scarlett Studio 2 mic. And it's just because when I was looking to get a new mic, there was just a bundle where I could get like the mic, the XLR cable. There was a like a Focusrite Scarlett box to like put the XLR cable into. There was a headset. There was like kind of like everything came with it, and it was like super super cheap. And I was like, yeah, I'll just get that.
No, you gotta go for those bundles, yeah. Because my interface is a Foresight. Yeah, I think that's how you say the company.
Hmm.
And it's a friend that sold it to me because I want to try an XLR input.
Mhm.
You know, not that I honestly for me probably USB would have been fine, right?
Mhm.
You know, because there's a lot of fixing that I do in post. Well, not a lot of fixing that I do in post, but you know, I work with the audio now in post and stuff like that, and
Mhm.
that kind of helps like get the sound that I like and things like
Yeah,
that.
definitely.
But so we're kind of around the midway point for this show, and this
Mhm.
is a section that I always like doing. I've refined it over the years. Of years? Has it been years? At least a year. um, but so being like a voice actor, I'm kind of curious. What is your biggest criticism of the field? Like, basically, give me your hottest take.
Ooh. Ooh, okay. Um, I think that if you go into voice acting, I think you be prepared to have to be prepared to act well. And I know that sounds really simple, but a lot of people go into voice acting and they're just like, I have a nice voice, I can do this. And it's like a lot of times in voice acting, you have to be able to act and act higher than you think you can. Especially in like anime voice acting, they like exaggerate every single thing that they say, you know. They do these really silly voices where they scream and shout and you know, a lot of times in like games it's a similar thing. Um and a lot of people think they can go into voice acting just because they have a nice voice, and it's not always as simple as that. You have to be able to act. You have to, you know, learn those techniques and learn about acting. And you know, you don't have to be on a stage and do it, but just because it's behind a mic doesn't mean, you know, there's less talent to it.
Yeah, I'm always kind of because I do get what you're saying. Like, yeah, it is. There's like a lot of acting involved, but I've kind of taken some. Yeah, I guess I've had some criticisms about like I guess the voice direction in certain anime, or I guess some broadly some animated shows, in the sense that I
Mm,
think they go a bit too extreme with emoting, and I get how part of that you kind of have to because it is an animated format, and you know a lot
mhm,
of the emotion does come from the voice. But I feel like I don't know. There are times where I think I think there's like a fear of going too subtle in those types of shows or in those types
mm.
of environments. I guess I could kind of lead this into a broader question. Like, what is like the best? I mean, granted, I don't know if you've necessarily worked with like with a voice director in a lot of these projects because you know it's your projects are kind of smaller. But I guess what is the best type of voice direction that you've gotten in the past, if you have gotten it?
Um, I've not necessarily had voice direction, like live voice direction. Um, so I'm not too sure on what I can say in regards to voice direction, but in terms of what I've learned from acting, it's a lot of it is just kind of really like letting go and putting yourself in that character's shoes. um a lot of people are just like, okay, I'm gonna do the voice for this character, and it's like, no, you have to like become that character. You know, you have to put yourself in their shoes. There's a technique I learned when I was in college, and it's by a very famous, like I don't know what the word is, a very famous figure in acting and in theater called Stanislavski. Um, and he has a thing called emotion memory, which is where whenever you're like acting something, you know, if you have to be sad, then try and think about a time that made you sad so you can really encapsulate that emotion in it. And hearing the difference between my voice acting after doing like acting in college and, you know, before when I was just doing voice acting for fun and I wasn't taking it as seriously, the difference is very much night and day because, again, I've had that sort of educational training to it.
So, as somebody that does engage with other people's like voice acting work, because like you said, you've watched, anime on Netflix and stuff like that. Well, I guess I should ask beforehand, like, is like, I don't know how busy you are with your work, but do you still engage with like, animated works, like the work of other voice actors or other like animated shows, stuff like that?
Yeah. Aside from, you know, checking out the stuff that some of my friends are in, I also just really enjoy listening to voice acting. I feel like the best way to learn is to listen and to see what other people do. Um, I feel like that's kind of in any field really. If you want to get better at like stage acting, then you go and see theater performances. You know, if you want to get better at uh it's for anything. If you want to get better at sports, you go and watch people play the sport that you want to get into, it's about like engaging in that field in just any way that you can and learning what you can visually. So yeah, I try to keep up with like some animated stuff. I try to see what's going on and engage in that still. I feel like it keeps me on my toes.
No, the only reason why I ask is because I'm kind of using it as an excuse that the recent, with this whole talk of like voice direction and like, I guess voice acting broadly, that I did an episode about this a while back, but I talked about Dispatch, and I think one of the strong suits of that that game is not only the voice acting, but I think like the voice direction, because they had the very challenging job of taking real life people that have like very recognizable voices, like Moist Critical, Joel Haver, even like Aaron Paul to some degree, and you had to kind of like chameleon them into like these characters. And so I guess, well, two questions going off of that, and I guess I'll start with as you, I guess, kind of, and because I know this is like a debated thing in like voice acting, like how much do you have to like be able to do like all these different voices versus like doing one voice but doing it really well. How, I guess, what's your approach to that? Like, are you worried that as you continue voice acting and as potentially as you get bigger, that you're gonna run into the problem of your own voice being like too recognizable, and that makes it more challenging to like approach certain roles? Or are you fine with just like the idea of like just honing your voice just for like very specific roles or very specific like projects?
So that's a very good question. I feel like a couple things with that is, firstly, if I ever get to a point where I could be recognized just for my voice, I can be happy. I will die happy. But in the meantime, I think that it kind of links back to what I said earlier about being good at acting, not just having a nice voice, because even if your voice is pretty much the same in everything you do, it's about using that voice and just stretching it to any limits that you can and kind of making it as versatile, even if it sounds the same. Like in Dispatch, for example, like Punch Up is played by Jacksepticeye, and Jacksepticeye has a very recognizable voice.
That was the other person I was thinking of. Sorry, go ahead.
It's all good. Being like, what a one of the most popular like people, like Irish people in media, as a content creator. So whenever you hear like his voice, you know, oh, that's Jacksepticeye. And when I first started playing Dispatch, I definitely heard it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is just Jacksepticeye. But as the game went on, I very much forgot that it was him, and it very much he just became Punch Up because of the way that, you know, he spoke, the way that he acted. And the thing is that he didn't change his voice all that much. If anything, it still very much sounds like him, but you know, like you said, the direction, like the voice direction for the game and just the way that he's used that acting is very good in that game. As there's a lot of other like content creators and people who do voice acting in a very similar thing. I mean, I didn't know until recently, but like Matt Pat has like a degree in theater, which I just didn't know until recently. And he voice acted Toy Bonnie in the new Five Nights at Freddy's 2 movie.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, it's just gonna sound like Matt Pat, you know, I'm gonna go in there and Toy Bonnie is gonna be like, that's just a game theory, it's gonna sound exactly the same. And I heard it, and the second I heard it, I was like, there's no way that's Matt Pat. There's no way. It just sounded so different. So it's not so much whether it's your ability to do different voices and whether you can change your voice, but it's what you do with the voice that you have. And if you're more versatile and if you can, you know, change your voice a bunch, then, you know, I guess you have more to work with. But to your question of, you know, whether I think it will be more of a struggle if my voice becomes more recognizable and kind of, you know, like that bracket. It's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. I'd like to say that I have a versatile voice in some regard, but I also have a big background in singing, so I guess I have that like training to be able to change my voice a little bit. But I do feel like for people who their voice is very recognizable, like Moist Critical and Jacksepticeye, particularly I think with Moist Critical, because he has quite a, I say this in a positive way, but like quite a like monotonous voice, but that's not like a bad thing necessarily. It just means that I guess he kind of only fits into those roles. Like I can't picture him playing, you know, like a student who's like really high energy and, you know, like Deku from My Hero. Like I could not picture him in that kind of role. Yeah, I'm not too sure, to be honest. That's a very good question. I'm not really sure.
No, it's fair. And because one criticism that I have with like a lot of modern dubbing companies is that even though they do employ like I think really talented individuals, the problem is they employ the same 5 talented individuals over and over again for like different roles, you know. And I've always wanted to kind of see them expand the field by like hiring more people, because there are plenty of people that want to voice act, and it would add variety to things. But like nowadays it's like either you go with like the default veteran or you go with like the internet celebrity, and there's like no in between.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that a lot of voice actors are very much you can hear their voice and you know it's exactly who it is. Like the amount of times I've watched something and I'm like, that's Matt Mercer, isn't it? Like,
yeah, and you don't hate their voice, but it's like,
exactly.
Come on.
They have a lovely voice, but it's like, surely there's got to be somebody else that can do this.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe it's just because, you know, they're quite beloved. So a lot of people will just watch the series or engage with something because that actor's in it. You know, maybe it's one of those. You know, like a lot of the appeal, at least that I heard from like mutuals of Dispatch, was that, oh my gosh, we get to hear like Moist Critical and Jacksepticeye voice in it. Like, oh, that's gonna be so cool. So, and I think a lot of hiring people who are quite popular is just because people will watch it because they're in it. But then that takes away from like the variety and diversity that we could get with things by hiring new voice actors. I really love voice acting in like FPS games, and that might just be because I play FPS games. But things like Overwatch and Valorant, they hire a lot of voice actors, at least recently, that and like the role that they hire them for will be their debut role or will be like their biggest role they've had. And it is just, it's really nice to see them, hire people that aren't super like popular and renowned and just get people who are authentic to the character, which is really nice to see.
Um, well, I guess kind of the second question I want to ask with Dispatch was that that's the most recent example I could think of like, oh man, like voice acting that actually really impressed me in
Mm.
terms of like its quality and like again
Hmm.
what they did with it. I guess for you, what recent show has like I guess has also had the same effect on you that's like really impressed you with like what they did with like the voice direction or like one particular performance in the show? Yeah,
Ooh.
basically of that.
um. So, oh god, I've been watching a lot of Bluey lately. Like the Australian show with the dogs.
Yeah, I've heard of
Um,
it.
yeah, I've been watching that, and I just love the voice acting in that because it's so authentic. Like, it doesn't sound like they're acting or they've been given a script and been like told they have to do it this way. It just sounds like they've put all the characters in a room and said, okay, today you're going to talk about this, and have just hit record and let them go. Um, I've been watching like behind the scenes of Bandit's voice actor, who is the dad, and he sounds exactly the same. But even his mannerisms and the way he talks, he is very similar to Bandit. Um, and it's just like, yeah, they did a really good job casting him because he plays the part very well. He's charismatic, he's funny, he's caring. He's got just like that dad energy. he's it's very lovely to see. But the voice acting's just so lovely and authentic there. Um, and besides like a couple celebrity appearances, there's not anybody in there that at least I recognize from any other media.
Yeah, and that makes sense because like Blue's been like really well regarded. Like I think it's won awards here and there.
Mm.
I'm not too familiar because it's like it's an Australian show and they have like the
Mhm.
it's not like the American Emmys. They have like their own version of it that I'm not
Yeah,
too
yeah.
aware of. But no, yeah, I've heard in very good things about Bluey. I haven't watched it myself though, but no, I've heard very good things about it. Um, I guess kind of shifting back to your own work. Sorry for that little detour.
No, no, it's good.
Um, but I guess for yourself, because and granted, I'm not sure how free you are to talk about this because I know some projects have to be kept under wraps because of like
Mm.
let's say NDA or like some details aren't fully fleshed out. But I guess for you, what future projects do you have on the horizon that you could talk about and maybe kind of give a little spoiler for your guests or any of my listeners if they're interested in following your work, which you should be.
Ooh. um. So again, I don't think I could share specific details, but I am working with somebody to voice in a an upcoming game, which is very exciting. Again, I love voice acting in games and just like listening to voice actors. So having someone reach out and ask if I can voice in a game is oh my gosh, that is unreal. Um, yeah, that is just it's just I genuinely don't have words for it. It's so exciting.
Ah, dang! Now you got me invested. Okay, so you're gonna be voice acting in a game. Is it gonna come out on Steam?
It will, yes. They're currently in, kind of like the promotion and like development phase. So yeah, it's kind of just like they're just trying to get like gauge numbers, get people to like wish list the game, that kind of thing. Again, I can't, I don't think I can give more details than that, but yeah, super exciting.
Ah, dang it. Because
Sorry.
no, it's because I'm finishing up the Final Fantasy Tactics, like the remake, and I know I'm going to be looking for a game in the future, and I don't want to just, as much as I like Marathon, I don't want to default to it, because that game could tilt me sometimes. So I'm looking for a new game, and dang it, I want to know now. I want to know, but we'll have to, I guess, wait and see to figure that out. But I guess, let me try and think. I guess for your own voice acting work, because obviously you have a passion for voice acting, you love it, but like with me in podcasting, there are certain things that like annoy me about it. For example, I'm not very good at like audio editing. I don't like it, but you do it for the love of the game. So I guess I'm kind of
Yeah.
curious for you, what is that with voice acting? Like, what is the one annoying thing about voice acting that you just don't like?
Um, yeah, I'll agree with you. It's the editing. um, I, I like I'm not necessarily a bad editor, but it's just time consuming. Um, Especially when there's so many small details I have to keep in mind, and uh like it falls into the ASMR bracket, so I have to be mindful of things like mouth noises and, small little sounds that might pick up on the microphone. Um, if I'm doing like animations, I have to put my voice over it, but I also have to edit sounds to like sync up with the animation. And then I have to edit all of that together, and then I have to, edit like ambience around it, depending on what the environment is. So, if the characters are like one I did recently where they're on a beach, so I have to add like beach sounds, and then I have to think about like, oh, like would there be any sand sounds here? And it's so much effort.
No, yeah, no, yeah. God, I imagine that podcast, that this program has to be terrible for like ASMR, because I don't take that into account at all. Like, even when I'm playing back to listen to it, I'm usually just listening like off speaker, right? Just like having it away from my ears or whatever. Um, but oh my god, I'm losing my train of thought. Let me think. Let me think. Let me think. Let me think. Um, so you okay? I just remember. So you do occasionally stream, but from my understanding, it's not something you regularly do. But you did have a post saying that you want to start doing it again, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so I do a stream here and there, and I would like to stream regularly, but I'm just very bad with time management. So I did some streams here and there on like another site, and I just stream whenever I felt like it. But I've been really wanting to try like streaming on Twitch, and seeing how that goes. So I was like, yeah, if we hit a certain milestone, I'll start streaming on Twitch, and I'll stream a lot more regularly.
Well, here's hoping you hit that milestone.
Thank you.
But I guess one thing with streaming, or I guess this might apply broadly, is that I don't know how often you tell people, like, in your day to day life, oh hey, my job is voice acting, or I do like dubbing or whatever.
Hmm.
Because I imagine that for voice actors, and I don't know if this is necessarily the case, but when you tell somebody that like you're a voice actor, they kind of treat it like a party trick. Like, oh, you're a voice actor? Can you do a voice, like do a Barney voice or something, or just something ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Is that ever something that you kind of have to keep in mind when you tell people that you voice act, or even like, let's say you stream and you tell people you're a voice actor, you might get people in chat being like, "Oh, I'll donate 5 bits if you do this voice or whatever."
Yeah, a lot of times, if I'm meeting new people and I tell them that, I do streaming or I do content creation, they're always like, "Oh, what's your name? I'll look you up." And I'm like, I really don't want that. I don't want to be perceived. At least not by anybody that I know. So usually when people ask what I do, I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm an editor. I edit. I don't even
I mean,
tell
you're not wrong.
people. Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not lying, so I don't feel guilty about it. But I'm just like, yeah, I'm a freelance editor. That's what I do.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Um, so let me think. Um, well, I guess kind of going back to, I know you can't talk too much about like the upcoming game project that you have, but I
Hmm.
guess in the Vegas terms, if you can, how has the experience been different for voice acting in like, let's say, a game versus like your usual voice acting of like an animation or something like that? Because I imagine with like
Hmm.
voice with like a game, depending on the type of game, you have to not only voice act like dialogue, but sometimes like you see it sometimes with behind the scenes of like video games, especially like fighting games, which I'm a huge fan of. You see the voice actors having to do like several grunt takes, like if the character's getting hit, like
Yeah.
ugh, you know. So
So
yeah, go on.
in voice acting, those are called like efforts, and it just means like any sounds that they make that aren't dialogue. Um, and yeah, it's kind of yeah, that's kind of the process of this, like recording lines and then recording a bunch of those efforts, just for where they're needed for when they do all the sound mixing for the game and such. Um, Part of voice acting somebody for a game is working on developing that character with them. So a lot of times when people start making games, they don't say like, okay, I need this exact voice, I need this. Um, they'll hold auditions, and sometimes people will voice and they'll be like, no, I kind of like how this would sound. Uh, and they work with the voice actor to create the best version that they can of the voice. So yeah, a lot of times it is just kind of a compromise in the middle of what like the directors or like the game devs want and what the voice actor's able to give. Yeah.
Yeah, because I imagine what you call like efforts or for the
Yeah, yeah.
yeah the grunts. Yeah, I imagine like I mean every kid like every kid's kind of had dreams of like being a voice actor or something, and I've kind of thought about it, but I thought I don't have like the I don't know if it fits like my strong suits as like yeah, I guess I don't know. Well, because I don't count this as like a creative endeavor what I'm doing with the podcast. But anyways, I always imagine that like doing the efforts would have to be kind of if hypothetically I were to get into voice acting, like the biggest hurdle for me because like kind of doing those sounds like purposefully is like weird because it's like involuntary, right? Like when you get punched, I don't mean to sound like, a cat getting strangled. It just happens, right? You
Yeah.
don't think about it. So
Um
I guess how do you kind of formulate that kind of like I guess sound? Like how do you kind of take that into account, especially with you and doing the more sensual recordings? Like how do you
yeah.
kind of how do
um
you because it's like it's an unconscious thing for me. I couldn't even fathom like you know making that sound outside of that context if I do at all.
so the first thing is just letting go of like shame, because a lot of times like particularly in the sense that I do it, there's a lot of like embarrassment, and it's like, oh, I'm gonna cringe when I hear this, or like secondhand embarrassment. So the first thing you have to do is just let go of that. So something that I did is I can have like a direct monitor or on my microphone, which means I can hear myself back. And as soon as I got my microphone, I just put that on, and I've had it on since, so I can like always hear myself. And it's just trained me to get used to the sound of my own voice. So I kind of just like brute forced it, but that's the first thing I think is just getting rid of that shame, because again, with acting, a lot of it is about confidence and about feeling comfortable in what you're doing. And you might not think it does, but it definitely shows through if you're not confident. So let go of that shame and be more confident in how you're sounding. The second thing is kind of what I was talking about earlier with like the emotions and like that emotion memory is not like physically obviously doing anything. So say if I was getting like punched in the gut, I wouldn't obviously physically punch myself in the gut, but like, I put my hand like I'm going to punch myself in the gut, and then before I obviously get to it, stop, and then kind of mimic how my body would react to that. So like my stomach would kind of tense, and I'd hunch over a little bit, and my face would scrunch up. It might be a bit silly me standing there, like, repeatedly going to look like I'm punching my stomach, but it kind of helps you figure out how you would sound during that situation. Yeah, it's just a lot of thinking about the nuances of it like that. And then after a while, you kind of get used to being able to just replicate it casually. But at the beginning, I was definitely like, how on earth am I going to replicate this? Like, how am I going to make a sound for like, if someone like bumps into me or if someone surprises me. When I was doing the stuff on YouTube, there was a lot of things. It was like in the stage directions, it would say, oh, they bump into you, or they like, they tap your shoulder. And I'm like, how do I replicate that in an audio? And that's where it you kind of have to exaggerate things a bit. Like if someone tapped my shoulder, I wouldn't turn around and go, like really loudly, but you have to think about how to represent that in an audio. So yeah, I think just letting go of that embarrassment is step one. And step two is about trying to just like physically imagine how like that would make your body react. Like if there's something where I have to be like out of breath, or if I'm like getting chased in an audio or something, I will like physically stand up and like do a lap around my room and then like stand in front of my mic again so I sound out of breath. I hope that made sense, but
No,
yeah.
no, I got you. Yeah, and it's funny because like I know in acting, a lot of people, because I imagine, I don't know, this is talking about like, I don't know if this is like too esoteric for this podcast here, but I know there was like some discourse on Twitter a little while back ago about like Timothy Chalamet, who I like as an actor, but he was doing work for Marty Supreme, and it was part of it was like method acting. And he was talking about like, oh, I like kind of made myself blind to play this role, and a lot of people were giving a flack like, dude, just act like you have glasses. Like, what are you doing? Right? And so I imagine like maybe there are some voice actors that would just go like, punch me in the gut. I need the real sound for this recording. Just nail me right in the gut, right?
Sometimes in those situations, it is easier to do that. It is easier just to be like I was recording once, and it was like one of the characters like jabs like the my character like in the ribs, and I was like, okay, I don't know how to replicate that, so I'm just gonna jab myself in the ribs. But sometimes, especially if you're playing a character that sounds nothing like you and would definitely react differently to you, I'm a very dramatic person. So if someone jabs me in the ribs, I'm like, I'll make a big reaction out of it. But some people would, they'd wince a bit more, or some people would have a bit more of a reserved reaction, or maybe they'd react a bit more like they'd snap back quite quickly. So if they get jabbed, they'd flinch or something. And it's about putting yourself in that character's shoes and thinking about how they would react. It's also difficult to replicate things like, wearing glasses if you've never worn glasses before. If you've never had issues with your sight, it's difficult to imagine what it's like to, have issues with your sight. I'm trying to think of an example that's like similar, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head, I guess like, if you're somebody that, doesn't have any allergies or intolerances to food, you can just go out and you can just order whatever you want. But when you're someone like who has an allergy or an intolerance, you always have to be mindful of what you're eating, what's in the food. And I guess someone that doesn't have those can't imagine what it's like to constantly have to worry about what's in food and, stuff like that. It's a really obscure example, but I'm sure you get what I mean. It's not just as simple as like, oh, just act it, just do that, because it won't be authentic then.
Right. Now, and part of the discourse too was like, because method acting tends to be a thing for like male actors, right? Because
Hmm.
again, I'm paraphrasing it, but part of it is like a lot of male, because of like masculinity, it's like harder to be more like you talked about, like kind of letting go of like that like embarrassment of doing something, so you have to
Hmm.
like come up with these like method acting routines to like get around it in your mind, right? um Whereas that might not necessarily be the case for like, female actors or anything like that, but it was just something to think about. It's funny that I always wondered like would you ever, like, for an April Fool's joke, or like just as kind of a joke recording, do um like a recording or a take, but or like post a recording or a take, and it's like you leaving in the really ridiculous like efforts, right? Like just like like it's like normal voice acting, and then you just leave in like the really ridiculous like character gets punched in the gut, you know. I thought that would
That
be
sounds like a very fun idea. Just having like something really, really just calm, casual, and then whenever there's any sounds are just incredibly exaggerated. That sounds amazing.
Well, Ava, we are approaching the hour mark. This has been an absolute delight. If you want to go ahead and shout out where people can find you, where people can find your work.
Yeah, I am mainly active on Twitter, under Avelia Audio. I also have a YouTube channel under the same name, which is where I post more long form stuff and safer work stuff. So if the central stuff isn't kind of your thing, then YouTube's the place. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been so fun.
Well, again, thank you for coming on the program, and thank you all for listening this far in. Stay tuned for after the program for breadsticks on the side, where I go into the process of how I actually produce an episode of Podcast Pasta. Take care, everyone.